Welcome to webinar number 4 with Martien Hermes from Zeist in Holland. Good morning, Martien.
Good morning.
And the last slide from webinar number 3 was this one. We are talking today on focus periods and turning points. Continued, is that right?
That's right, and I added another one, which is angular triads.
Very good. So this is where our viewers can find the background information. It's the address delineation.von-a-bis-w.de, and there is a subsite called Martien Hermes Webinars. And I added some information there. Now you find the dissertation of Dr. Dorian Gisela Greenbaum, tutor at the Master Studies in Lampeter Trinity College under the direction of Nick Campion. And her dissertation was The Daimon in Hellenistic Astrology, Origins and Influence. Her supervisor was the world-famous Professor Charles Burnett, and Francesca Rochberg was helpful that it was published in the Brill series, Ancient Magic and Divination, volume number 11. Then you have the YouTube channel from Martien. You find all the webinars here, 1, 2, and 3, and then there is my channel. You find the same, which I upload. I have the right to publish these webinars uncut and unedited, whereas Martien has the right to do whatever he wants to do with these webinar footages. So we have sort of a little bit of difference in publication, because when you go to my channel, you might find the Martien and Volker's faces on the right-hand top over here, whereas we hope that Martien is able to push it off the screen when he does his webinar today. Then you have Martien's homepage in Dutch and his contact information. And then, of course, we have the information about the background of this Aphesis Zodiacal releasing theory, which is only published in German up till now. The title is Die Lebenslinie im Horoskop. Erkennen Sie Ihre wichtigsten Lebensperioden und Ziele mit der klassischen Astrologie. So then there is Martien's film list on my channel. You find a lot more videos than just the webinars, as you can see, all the videos of Martien and quite a number of other informative videos. Then you have Martien on Facebook, and there's some information about Robert Schmidt here, and then the webinars, as I said. Now I get rid of the desktop, and now I have to give Martien the host function, and I will do that. Host erstellen. Martien, you should have
The host, yes, I am.
the host.
I'm looking at it. I'm going to share the screen.
So the stage is yours.
Thank you. Share. I'm going to get rid of these. I'm going to put them here. Okay, so welcome to our 4th installment of this demonstration on zodiacal releasing. What I'm going to do today is, together with Volker, checking out these things. The defining events is one of the other turning points and focus periods. And the last one that I'm going to talk about, which was presented by Robert Schmidt, is the turning points in the L1 and L2 major periods. And I will be introducing a new topic as well, the angular triads. People who are into Hellenistic astrology know what I'm talking about, but I will illustrate this with my own biography and the biography of Volker, because they are very interesting delineation principles, which you should learn very good, because they are very insightful, as you will see. So let's start with this. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about focus and turning point period number 3, the defining events in a certain phase of the scenario. So let's have a look at that. So here you see the chart of Volker again. So what are defining events? These occur whenever you encounter the Lord of the major L1 period in an L2 sub-period under this specific L1 period. So let's have a look. So here you see that in the first period of Volker's life, he was in a Virgin, the Virgo period of that image. And in around June of 1954, he encountered the image and the L2 period, which has Mercury in it, which is of course the ruler of the first image, the Virgin. So whenever you have that in periods, in L1 periods, under the L1 period and L2 period, whenever you meet the Lord of this specific period, then you have a defining event. So you can see in the Libra period, it's when Venus is reached, is in an L2 sub-period under Libra. And in the Scorpio period, you cannot find a defining event because the place where Mars is, which is in the Virgin, is not reached in this period because the period is too short for reaching this image, because it ends in the Leo period in 1991 and runs into 1992, and then it finishes and moves over to the next period.
What did you mean, 1992 or 52?
1992. Your Scorpio period hands over to.
Oh, we are down there. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So whenever you find, I think it's pretty obvious when you see this, whenever you reach the planet that has the rulership of the major period, then you have a defining event. And sometimes you don't have one because the planet is not reached because of perhaps the shortness of the L1 period in total.
What do you mean by the planet is not reached?
Because when you look at Scorpio, you see that the final period of the Scorpio L2 period is in Leo.
Yes.
And it finishes off by turning over the major period to Sagittarius.
Yes.
And as your Mars is in the Virgin, this period breaks off before.
Oh, okay, I understand. Yeah, I understand.
Virgin, okay. So Mars is not reached. So
you mean the whole sign is not reached where Mars is in? Okay.
Right. Yeah, that's the one. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So here you can look at this. Well, these periods needs to happen. The last one is not yet here, but there's always the question about whether or not the new period ruler after a loosening of the bond, which takes place here under the crab, which is in 2021, which is coming. We talked about it in the last episode of this video series. Yes. The losing of the bond will be quite soon in the Volker's chart, so we will be interviewing him after this period to try to figure out what's going on. But then the question always is, does the new ruler of the period have a certain impact on it, or is it just in cooperation with the primary ruler, as here is with Saturn, Kronos? But because they are in the same image, conjunct even, the question is whether or not how strongly this is emphasized. There was something that someone remarked about these losing of the bonds period. Paulo Mendes, he said, you forgot the foreshadowing period. And the foreshadowing period is simply the sequence of what happens after the losing of the bond, which goes from the crab to Capricorn again. And you see when you move up in May of 2013, in this period under Capricorn, the crab was reached, and then you see a sequence of images appearing, which also appear in the period after the losing of the bond. So there's a sort of repetition, and it's called by Robert Schmidt, I believe, foreshadowing, because what happens from 2013 until the losing of the bond is the same sequence of images which happen again under the loosening of the bond period. So this was called foreshadowing. So perhaps you can get a glimpse of what might happen by trying to understand what was going on in these periods from 2013 up until the loosening of the bond, and try to see what happened then. So that's an interesting feature that I forgot.
So the shadow period starts in May 2013, right?
No, not exactly the shadow period, but it's the same series of images which happen after the loosening of the bond. So whenever something important happened in these periods, or the sequence of events were meaningful to you, it might be that the same sequence of events might happen again, but now from the other point of view, simply because an other planet is now the major ruler of the period, which is in this case the moon. So that shift might be noteworthy. So thank you, Paolo, for mentioning this. I forgot to mention it, but it's a very interesting way to try to get a grip on what might happen after the losing of the bond. So these are the defining events. Not quite sure what was going on in your life, Volker, at all these moments. I will have a look at my biography, because there are certain things that can be said about them, because I know my biography very well. So Schmidt said that in this case, when a defining event is happening, it is as if the Lord of the period is sort of self-motivated, because the Lord of the major perfection is now able to pursue its own agenda, which is always something that has a lot to do with what's going on in a certain period in this scenario, because the planet that rules the entire period has a very major player in this complete sequence under an L1 period. So
in my case, this would be 2021. Self-motivation?
Yeah, let's have a look. No, it's whenever, in all these periods, whenever you see the planet pointing at the scenario, in all these periods, the planet itself was self-motivated. So when you look at, for instance, at the Libra period, you see that in 1974, Venus was the ruler of the sub-period for no less than about 30 months. So in that period,
I lost you here. Are we on the left-hand side now? Yes. 1997 and the
just for the exact, no, 1974.
1974. Okay, there we are. Okay.
Yeah, when you look at the Libra period, that's when you see the self-motivation activated.
And the Libra period starts when?
In 69.
69.
And it moves up until 1977 for 8 years.
Oh yes, there's the Libra period. In 30th of August 1969. Exactly. And you say self-motivation of the ruling planet.
Yes, which starts in the water pourer period for 30 months. As you can see there we find Venus, and that's the period then when the ruler of the major period, which is under Libra, gets self-motivated, because the ruler is there in that image, in that sign. Okay.
Yes, because that's where the Venus is in my birth chart.
Right. And there it's activated, and then it's a very important period, which is called a defining event.
And that has something to do with self-motivation of the Venus.
Well, yeah, Venus is self-motivated, so that's what.
Well, that is the time when I started my spiritual research and interests, because I became first member of AMOG, Rosicrucian Order, and later on Lectorium Rosicrucianum. So that would fit. Okay.
Yeah, that would figure very, very nicely, because both these planets have to do with religious experiences.
Okay.
So an interesting one. The word event is a bit weird here, because when you see in this period, it's about 30 months. So that's a complete period of defining events. So you could say it happens at the beginning, and then it lasts for quite a long time.
And it was the period when I had to prepare myself for the final first state exam of law. And that sort of self-motivation, I had to be at home and motivate myself to get this done. Okay.
Okay. Great. Yeah. Now let's have a look at my chart. here we are. When you look at my chart and you see on the left side my life work, which is under the Saturn Capricorn periods, these are also defining events simply because they encompass both factors, both the finding of a life work, and it's also a defining period. So in that case, it goes for two things. Now, when you look down, you see this one, Jupiter coming in the scenario, in my Jupiter in the Bowman in the 6th place. It's a defining event because now Jupiter is the L2 period ruler, and it's also the ruler of the major period on the Pisces. It's a defining event for the complete period. And I told in the previous talks that I had a very severe confrontation with fate, so to speak. My firstborn was taken up in crisis care and moved to a residential group because things got really out of hand here, and we had to take action to remedy the situation, but it was quite a difficult period. So the interesting thing is that it's Jupiter, which a lot of people would associate, well, these are happy times, right? Well, not in the latter period of this period. It was not such a great period. But the interesting thing is that this remedied the situation. And that's a Jupiter signification. Now, Jupiter is in my 6th place, which has to do with being not perhaps in charge, because it's a place of servitude, as is the 12th place. So yeah, these were quite interesting, but also quite difficult things to do. And it's of course not a natural thing to put a child in crisis care and remove her from the home where you have your family, right? So that was quite a difficult situation. So, but again, these actions remedied the situations and then they stabilized at home. So it was a difficult thing to do, but it was also very helpful. So
does that have something to do with being the 6th place, the bad fortune, and the 12th
right.
place, the bad diamond?
Yes, very much so. And the interesting thing is that Mars in the 12th place is the ruler of my 5th place, which is children, and also the ruler of the 10th place, which Valence also associates with children. So that's an interesting connotation there. Okay, so the next period was the arriving at the Mars period in my Aries major period. And the interesting thing there was that I organized a course in traditional astrology, horary astrology, and the attendance was overwhelming. I had never had such a big group of people wanting to learn about traditional horary astrology ever. So this was quite a big boost for me. And I had many classes, workshops, and speaking arrangements in Germany from 2003 to 2007, because I struck up a friendship with Erik van Sloten, which is a Dutch astrologer living in Germany. And
which
also
is the most famous horary astrologer in Germany.
Right.
He is the torchbearer of horary astrology in Germany.
Right. And well, we had a nice friendship, and a lot of good things happened from that. So
how did you organize that in Germany? Where did you go for courses?
They were in Fulda. There was
with Baumgarten.
Yeah, so indeed.
So for the viewers, Baumgarten is sort of a Frawley follower, and in the 2000s he was quite a famous person for bringing traditional astrology to Germany, but he stopped doing that at the end of the 2000s. I think 2007 he stopped doing it and had other interests. So that was a short period, and in that period window, you got to a hold of him in Fulda and do the courses.
Yeah, right.
Okay.
Bergbauer is his name. Bergbauer.
Bergbauer, right. Bergbauer, right.
Yeah, that's the one. And he worked together with John Frawley and
Oscar and he had a lecture with Sue Ward in Fulda.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, that's right.
So there was a period in Germany where the traditional horary contents were flowering like in the Renaissance in in the area of Fulda because of Bergbau.
Right. Yes.
Yes,
Yes,
okay.
that's true. And John Frawley and Oscar of Eric van Sloten really had a lot of influence there, and so he
Yes.
organized a lot of things. So, yeah. Well, when we look at my Taurus period, the Venus rules the entire period. So the question is whether or not that does make the complete Taurus period defining. Yes, in a certain sense it did, because I published my book on moving and being moved, the return of fate in astrology, which was sort of the starting point of getting into trying to integrate fate more into astrology as such and into my practice. So,
but this book is still only in Dutch. It's not translated yet.
Only in Dutch, and it was also translated in French in 2016 by Patricia de Bas, which is very nice because that also made me available for the French market in a certain sense. But
so basically, you are waiting for one of our viewers to translate the book into English, right?
Rather into German, I would like. I've
okay.
found someone, but a lot of things happened in between, so I lost the possible translator for that. But well, we'll see how far it goes, right?
So
because
you want to have it in German, but you wouldn't be you would like to have it in English on the English market as well, right?
Well, yes, but the content is very much inspired by Robert Schmidt, and a lot of people in the English language are quite aware of all the material that I presented here for a Dutch audience because they were unfamiliar with it. And this goes for the French public as well, because a lot of...
and it goes for the German public. Robert Schmidt is, and nobody knows Robert Schmidt in Germany.
Ah, okay. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, so let's try to find someone who is good in Dutch and can also translate it into German.
Okay.
There was someone you interviewed who was perhaps able to do that.
No, there was a comment on one of the Facebook groups, the astrological Facebook groups, where the webinar was posted, and she was asking if it's available as a book, and I have responded that we are waiting for somebody to transcribe the webinars into English. That was the background.
Yeah, that's also a good one. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so that was the one for me. Well, another very important thing to take into consideration is we talked about the exaltation lords, and please refer to the webinar, the last webinar I did with Nightlight Astrology about the houses, the images, and the places.
And the viewers find this webinar on your your YouTube channel, the Nightlife Astrology lecture, a guest speaker lecture. Yes.
Right, that's the one. And I talked about the exaltation ruler, what the function is, but it's also interesting to check out whether or not the exaltation ruler of a certain image, which is the ruler of the longer periods, the L1 periods, whether or not the exaltation lord of that image has a certain effect as well. And checking that out, I found some interesting things because when I look at Venus, which is the exalted ruler of the Pisces period, when this one came on the scene, I had my first doubts about the claims of psychological astrology. I was not really strongly invested in it yet, but there were some things going on which started me to think about, well, what's going on about psychological astrology, and especially the idea of projection, which is very strong in the Jungian astrology. I had my doubts about it because I read some books which really criticized the complete idea about projection as a factor in how humans interact with each other. So that was the first inkling I had. Well, something going on that's not quite right here. So, and then that certainly was a very interesting thing to explore further. And then I started reading the anti-psychiatry movement. Perhaps you know that there was a very strong anti-psychiatry movement going on, having strong criticism about what was happening in psychological treatments. Not psychoanalysts, but really the scientific psychology, which were quite well interesting and also very confrontational for someone like me who had just studied Freudian astrology and Jungian astrology, but they were very interesting. So that was one of the things I noticed from this period, which was relatively short.
I can give an information about Jung in that context. There is a book available. I have posted it on the book. I have a subsite, Philosophy and Books. And there's a book on the market, Encounter with Jung by Eugenie Rolfe. And for people who want to find out how Jung is positioned in relation to the daimon, that might be a good idea. But I have a question to your text here. Whenever the domicile master is in aversion. Now, that's okay. Then the exaltation lord is probably the sole functioning domicile master. What happens if Jupiter is not in aversion? Jupiter being the domicile master of Pisces. What if he is not in aversion? Is then the domicile lord the predominant king chieftain?
No, I would think that there is a definition in the book by Robert Schmidt, Definitions and Foundation, and they are both called joint domicile masters, so that they both have a role with representing this image. So I think it's a very good idea to check out whether or not the exalted ruler is one of the planets that is in the L2 period coming to the fore, and I think this also a defining period.
So basically you are saying if it's, in your case, it's Jupiter and Venus, we are talking about an additional level of complexity in delineation.
Well, only if you try to interpret everything as strictly as possible. This is simply a method of finding periods. In my case, the Pisces period, did certain defining events happen. And when I look back in my biography, which I do in Excel, and try to memorize everything that happened to me in certain periods, then I found this one, and I found that a very interesting.
Yeah. So you are not using this situation for further digging deeper into a delineation process, but simply to find a period in your life.
Yeah, right. Where there's certain important thing, because these periods are quite long, especially when you look at Capricorn or in this case the water pourer, the Aquarius. Yeah. These are very long periods, and these turning points and defining events have a lot to do with trying to get to within these longer periods, trying to find when there's something special going on, and these are these defining events.
Yes.
So when I look at the Aries period, I have my sun in Aries, which is the place of exaltation for the sun.
When you say Aries period, you are meaning Mars period, right? Because the sign is Gemini.
No. I'm talking about the Aries period in my life, which started at the.
Oh, you're talking about this Aries beginning on the 13th of August.
Yes. Right.
Right.
Okay. The one. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So there I find my sun, which is in Aries, and well, yeah, you could say perhaps this is also a very defining event, simply because the exalted ruler is there in that place. So yeah, you could say that this is again a complete period which is very defining, and I can really attest to that, because that really was a very defining period. I will get into that later when we get to the end of the Triads, which I will also delineate for your chart, Volker, because you also have an angular period defined by your scenario. So
yes.
So the interesting thing is that very recently the exalted ruler of Taurus was activated. Just up until next week. Is this a defining moment? Yeah, I got a new job, which is interesting. Simply because...
What sort of job did you get?
I'm a night watcher.
A night watcher? What is that?
Yeah, so that means that I work in a psychiatric institution where I'm the night guard, and I can sleep there, which is a moon thing. But I also did... that in the period of the Aries period, I also worked in an institution, which was another one, but I will get to that because some things happen there which are highlighted by the defining event. So I will get back to that in a minute.
Okay.
So also my father died the month before. As I said in a previous lecture, do not always, what I often experience is that just before a new period happens, something is changing. So let's take the example of my father. He died the month before this period started. So you could say that the period of Leo, where my moon is, has to do, which is also the rule of my first place. So the moon is me in a certain sense in my chart. So you could say that I had to redefine my position with my father, everything that happened in my life with regards to my father. And that's the period indicated by Leo where my moon is. So just before this new period happened, something happened to sort of illustrate what was going to happen in the next period. This is also true for this defining event indicated by Jupiter. Now I move again to the left side of the picture where you see the Pisces period. And when you see my Jupiter being activated as a defining period on the Pisces, which is the 14th of June in the year 2000, which is a period that my daughter left, my firstborn left our house, which is very defining. And it was sort of a, how do you say, something that preceded what was going on in the next period, which I had to deal with, which was let's say, a trauma, because my daughter had to move house and our family was sort of broken up, which is a very interesting thing, but also very painful. So it was healing, but yes, it was also painful. So you could see that the defining event happened just before a new period started. And that's what you often see in this method. Just before a new period happens, some events might happen that have to do with what you have to work through or have to deal with in the next period, so which is in my case the Leo period under Taurus. Okay, so and then again the good news was that I started the video series after the first webinar of Nightlight Astrology, which are much appreciated, and then Volker invited me to do this sort of series, and well, we get a lot of attention, and I hope this is going to work out very well for us both, and for me especially, simply because I love doing this. So when I look at the next period, which is again in a few days, which is then the L2 period shifts to the
That's next week, right?
That's next week. So then we have to do another talk, and well, perhaps something interesting. Again, when I talk about this, what I just said about my father dying, and that's a sort of...
Your father was dying when?
In the 24th of September in the 2019.
2019.
Which is simply...
that's a few days. That's a few days
right.
before Leo started. Okay.
Right, and now I'm doing this talk, and that's just a few days before the next L2 period starts under Taurus. And the interesting thing is we are gaining attention with these videos. And that's interesting because I just said that something often happens just before a new period arrives. And this is happening right now. So I'm very curious as to what is going on in
your experience, this happening before the new L2 period starts. Are you talking about weeks or months before the changing of the L2?
Well, I think it's about weeks and sometimes even days.
Oh, it's not months. It's a little bit. It's close. It's close to the changing of the L2.
Yeah.
Okay.
And other people might say, well, this is a bit fuzzy because these dates do not match exactly with stuff happening. But I'm fine with that because it's simply this is what's called, I think, the individuation scheme of Jung.
Yes.
So, things happen and you have to work out these things and you have to learn to.
And it's a flowing process. It's not a
right.
now is the minute, you know.
Right. Yeah, just as we talked about in the last presentation, is finding the exact date of a marriage, is that really the essence of your married life?
Yes,
No,
yes,
it's not. It's
yes,
just
okay.
simply one of the episodes, which is perhaps not even important in a complete story of your relation with a person. So that's what this method is about, and it's
So
very
you are changing
Mhm.
on next week, 25th. Is that Sunday? I think that's Sunday. This coming Sunday.
Could be, could be. I'm
Yeah.
not quite sure. I'm not. I'm just looking at my. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, it's
Would
next Sunday.
you
Right.
dare to do a prediction?
Well, what I said
What you
in this.
expect? What you expect?
Well, what I'm saying here, that might suggest a boost simply because Mercury is in the 10th place.
Okay.
It's with my sun, which is the first triplicity ruler of my chart, which, yeah, it might be a good period, but it's also in aversion to the period that's now at hand, because the Virgin. So Aries is in aversion to the Virgin, which means that my Mercury is not in contact with this Virgin, with its own domicile. So that might mean that either Saturn or Venus takes over. I hope it's Venus. But
Okay.
but Schmidt also says that the texts say that whenever you need to choose another ruler, choose the one which is in the favorite sect of the chart. So I have a day chart, so it might probably be Saturn taking over, because Saturn can see the Virgin. So that seeing that's actually a configuration, and it's an aspect word, seeing. Aspectus means to look at. So yeah, Saturn can see the Virgin and might take over. So as I say here, perhaps this might suggest a boost in my astrological activities due to these videos with Volker and the Nightlight Astrology webinars. And I'm already invited back for a next
Okay.
Nightlight Astrology. So that's very nice.
I have a question to that.
Yeah.
In this book from Dr. Greenbaum, she is talking about Vetus Valens and his ambivalence into the lot of fortune and the lot of diamond, and the interconnection and the exchangeability of lot of fortune and lot of diamond. We are doing in these webinar series, we are doing a main focus on the development of the lot of diamond in the life, the chapters of the life. Do you have some personal experience on this aspect of Vetus Valens and Dorian Greenbaum in that case, that the lot of fortune and the lot of diamond are more connected than the impression we are giving here? We are giving the impression this is an isolated lot of diamond process, and we don't have to look elsewhere for example, for what happens on the 25th of April 2021. In your practice, do you always or sometimes or seldom look at the development of the houses of the lot of fortune in that context?
Yeah, I seldom do, because I have much difficulty in trying to get a grip on the Aphesis with the lot of fortune, as I do with the phases of with a lot of the diamond.
So basically, you are content with what the lot of
Yeah.
diamond gives you
Yes.
an information about,
Yeah.
and in your personal approach, the lot of fortune is more in the background.
Yes, simply because I tried to figure out, for instance, the lot of fortune is about what befalls the native, but also what befalls the body. So it has a lot to do with illness and diseases. Yes. And I had a small group here trying to figure out whether or not we could see the same things that I'm presenting here with the method of the lot of fortune in relation to diseases and illness. And
but the interesting point is this theoretical problem addressed in this rather large dissertation book. The interesting point is that she says, Dorian Greenbaum says, the restriction to bodily harm is a too short an approach. The interconnection between fortune and daimon is also, that's her language, also relevant for career problems.
Oh,
But,
yeah, I
but
think
up,
so too, yeah.
But in your personal experience, it's not necessary for finding out what happens in the cure if you stick to the diamond process.
Yeah, because the diamond has a lot to do with what you want to do and how you act, and the fortune has to do with what befalls you. Now, in the chart, you can see all the planets listed in the sub-periods. When you look at my Taurus period, you can see the twins where Mars is, and you can see the crab where my rising image is, where it's my ascendant, etc. And you see in Leo, you see my moon. Schmidt said that these planets have to do with the factors that are influencing you, the things that are at hand, which are motivating you to take action. So in the second period, for instance, in the Gemini period, when Mars was the ruler, Mars is the thing that inspires me to do what I want to do, but I do it in the way that Venus says. So
basically you are saying if something from the outside befalls you, like a plague, like corona, or like a change in government, in my case, in my career, because if my government changed, my job changes. And so basically, if it's coming from the outside, we are talking more about the lot of fortune. And if it's on my internal motivation side and what I want to do and what I'm going to do, that's more the diamond side.
Right. Yeah, that's it. So these are motivations for action. That's a very important keyword for this. So back to my little period of the Virgin. As I say in red, the previous periods of Mercury were a mixed blessing with successes as well as tribulations. So I'm just waiting to see what's going to happen. Perhaps somebody will begin to criticize me because of what I'm saying here or the way I do this. Well, that's okay. I'm fine with it. I wasn't fine with it in my Aries period because I was very angry then at all the confrontation.
Well, basically, my approach is we are doing this on the internet, but basically I'm doing this with you, and the internet is not that relevant for me.
Yeah.
That's by the way, for the viewers, one reason why you can't comment on my YouTube channel on the videos. If you want to comment, you have to go to Martien's YouTube channel. You can comment there. But in my practice, none of my videos on YouTube are allowed for comments because of that.
Okay.
I shield myself from the bad experience you are I shield myself from the mixed blessings of the internet.
Oh, yeah. Very good. Okay, let's have a look at the next one. So now we come to the fourth turning point period, focus period. So let's have a quick look at that. Again, there's a certain thing going on, and in this case, we come to the other image, the sign or domicile of the major time lord. So in your case, when we look at the Libra period, we are hoping to find the Taurus period, which cannot be reached under Libra. And when you look at the Scorpio period in your life, it will be reached when you come to the period of Aries, because then Mars, the ruler of the major period, also becomes the ruler of the minor period. So here you can see this. So these are the turning points. So why are they turning points? Simply because the ruler, as Schmidt says, the lord of the major perfection, the L1 period, is now able to reassert itself because it's now the ruler of the L2 period under its own period, under its own major period.
So it's a doubling of the influence.
Right. And it's an extra factor because now in a time frame, this planet is actually calling the shots. So that's the reason why this is such an important period, and also a turning point. And the word turning point and defining events are very equal to each other. I think they are both turning points and they both have to do with defining periods, but well, yeah, we can have a look at that. So these are the periods in your life, Volker, when this happens or happened. So it's interesting. Do you know something about 2006, when when the Saturn period began and in the L2 period, Saturn again was
the L2 in Aquarius, you mean? Yeah. 18th of May of 2006. Not really. That was when I had already retired, and I'm now in my 25, 26. I'm in my second year of graduate studies for my doctoral thesis, Astrology and Law.
Okay.
And in 2006, I was in university as a student, met a lot of people, had interesting experiences, but there was nothing special.
Okay. Well, the interesting thing is that, of course, there are 2 planets in Aquarius in your chart. So
Yes.
do you have a big influence?
Well, it was a nice time.
Ah,
I had Venus and Jupiter in Aquarius on the 2nd and 5th grade degree. I believe my Jupiter is on 2 and my Venus is somewhere around 5. And it was a very nice time.
Yeah.
The everyday process was very convenient. I enjoyed myself. I went to university every day. I met a lot of people. And for me, as a retired public servant, that was quite a nice experience, because it's, you're open, you're on your own. You decide what you're going to. I had no mandatory tasks to fulfill. I decided myself what I wanted to do, whether I wanted to attend a seminar in philosophy of religion, or I wanted to attend Professor Heuningen-Hühne with his philosophy of science seminars. It was a very free time to do what you want to do.
Oh, great. Yeah.
In that case, it's a typical Aquarian situation.
Yeah, and Venus-Jupiter situation.
Yes, in Aquarius, yes.
Yeah,
Being totally independent, but getting paid because I got my pension.
Yeah, right. Great.
Okay.
Now let's have a look at my life. Well, my first turning point was in 1984, which was interesting because then I quit the job that I had at that moment, and I wanted to devote myself to astrology entirely, which I did. So that was indeed a turning point. I broke off whatever other ties I had with other involvements. So that's also interesting. And you can see that the symbol of the daimon itself is in this image, in my Aquarius image. And that also has to do with sort of an inspiration spiritually. So you can say, yeah, I really chose to devote myself to astrology entirely. So that's an interesting one. I called this turning point already, my firstborn in crisis shelter and out of home placement. This one was also interesting. As I said before, I was working as a night guard, not sleeping at night, but being awake. So
and what month are we now?
We are in the period of Scorpio under the Aries major period, which is around 2010.
That's January of 2010.
Yeah, then this period started. It was later in that period that I had this work incident, which was mildly violent. And because of that, I was transferred to another position. So
did you get attacked?
No, yeah, sort of, yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
okay. By a patient?
Yes, but these were young people. So these were children, but they were children, to say the least. So, well, that's a Mars-Mars period.
Yeah,
right?
attack, okay.
Let's say violence or something like that.
How did you get to this job? Why did you? Was the astrology practice not supporting enough? So you need a job Okay.
I think there are not a lot of people in my country that can have a full-time job with astrology.
Yes,
and get a good meal from it. So that.
And what in your chart indicates doing this sort of work? Working with unstable people, psychiatric people. What in your chart is going in that direction?
Well, the Lord of my 10th place, Aries, is in the 12th place.
Oh, okay.
So that was a very important one for me. And staying awake at night was very interesting. I really loved doing that. So it was.
And that is still today the case, that your astrology practice is not sufficient to live on it.
Yeah, I had a lot of trials and tribulations, which I will be talking about when I'm coming to the issue of the angular triads.
Okay.
So that's interesting period of my life, to say the least. So,
do you have an explanation why in the European countries the astrologer people have more difficulties to live on their vocation than in America or Australia?
No, I don't.
Okay.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure why this is.
Okay.
So when looking at the exaltation rulers of a certain image, the places where the images which are the exaltations of the planet that rules the entire L1 period, you can check these out as well. Well, the first one was in 1971. I have no recollections of that period. The second period was a very important one. I had a breakup with my first girlfriend, which was very traumatic for me. The First Cut is the Deepest is a very nice song about that, which
that's in 79 now.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, that's Libra on the 10th of March of 1979. Okay.
Right, and Libra is the exalted, the place where Saturn is exalted. So that's what's going on here. So when I look at 1993, that was a very turbulent period. Again, my Pisces period was also very nice, but it was also quite turbulent, which had a lot to do with the opposition with Mars, but I will get to that in a moment. So in this period, I had a divorce. My astrology practice was closed because I had to live on, how do you call it, welfare, from state welfare. I'm not quite sure what term that is. I had my first encounter with traditional astrology in the sense that I...
in what way was that first encounter? By books or by a long distance course, or what was the first encounter?
It was the first reading about traditional astrology. In 93, 94, I subscribed to Hindsight. That was very important in retrospect, because at the moment it was interesting, but not really yet such a big influence as it became later.
Did all this, what you're writing in red here, divorce, astrology practice closed, started with first, but is that all happening in that L2 period in Cancer?
Yes.
It didn't switch. It didn't flow over into Leo. It was all happening in that L2.
It was happening in that period, and in the 1st of July 1995, I moved house. I moved from the southern part of the Netherlands to the middle Netherlands, which is the next period on the Leo, which is the moon, and the moon has to do with moving very often. So that's very interesting. So that was one. Here, the Mars period, because Capricorn is the exalted place of Mars, which is the ruler of the major period on the Aries, is a turning point with a question, yes. Because I was fired from the job that I had as a night watch due to bankruptcy of the place where I worked. So it was...
this psychiatric institution got bankrupt.
Right. It got bankrupt, yes, because it was an anthroposophical institute, and well, a lot of things happened there, and they went bankrupt. And then after a short period of being without a job, a few months, then I got a new job with a new owner of the place. And that was a year in which I had quite a difficult boss. It was a very strict one, and well, okay, it was good, but it also was not good. And again, I was dismissed due to budget cuts. I worked there for a year. So, and then I come into my, the other period. So, yes. So now we come at the end of the turning points that Robert Schmidt mentioned in his tutorial on zodiacal releasing. And now we are getting to the angular triads, which is very interesting in my life and also in the life of Volker, as you will see now. So let me first explain what the angular triads are all about.
Before we do that, if you have a client coming into your practice via Zoom, because that's what today is happening during COVID, and you see turning points in the abstract form, you see changing of the L2, how far do you go in prediction?
Well, what I first tried to do is to try to understand what's happening in the major period, even if it started a very long time ago, because that is a very significant piece of information for the entire period. And when I see a turning point in whatever shape or form, because there are 4 of them, then I try to figure out what was going on just before that period will come to the fore, and then try to figure out what might be happening in the life of the person. But the interesting thing is this, the life of the person always has something to do with what is going on in the zodiacal releasing periods. So you can check it out by checking out their biography, which is what you try to do with this method, and try to see, well, talking Jungian sense, what the individuation scenario is trying to inform the person about, if that's the right way to say this.
And my impression is correct. We have this large book, this dissertation from Dr. Greenbaum, and we have your book in German, Aphesis, and then we have Robert Schmidt, but Robert Schmidt is not available as an Amazon book. It has to be subscribed on the new homepage of Robert Schmidt. So basically we are talking about our webinars and other videos by Chris Brennan for Zodiacal releasing and other people. And we have this dissertation from Dr. Greenbaum and then the Robert Schmidt material, nothing else on the market, right?
No, and whenever the Zodiacal releasing tutorial comes online, please avail yourself of it, because Robert Schmidt uses very many examples of how he...
Okay. But as far as I understand the strategy of his widow, Mrs. Black, I believe, it's sort of a subscription process like Hindsight was. You have to subscribe for a year and then you get monthly informations, right?
Right, yeah. It was different in earlier periods, because then you could simply buy the complete sets of workshops or tutorials.
Yes.
For that.
It's a little bit a barrier. It would be nicer to have the things that you can select what you want to have and get it directly. Okay, but that's the situation it is. So basically our webinars and the one of Chris Brennan, but that's only one he did for 4 hours, I believe. Zodiacal releasing is still a niche in the published community.
I think so, yeah. In 2009, I wrote a book about it in Dutch again.
Yeah, but that's Dutch, you know.
Right, yeah. So because the interesting thing is you can really see the last example I did with Yomanda, the spiritual healer, is I have many more examples of things happening to famous persons in the Dutch community, things happening to them. So so
let's see whether there's some people are motivated to get into substantiate this Aphesis method via books. The webinars we are doing might be sufficient to use the method. I believe what we are doing now, this is the 4th webinar, and we might do some more. In the end of this webinar series, the people might be able to practice the method. But for the theoretical background, you might need Robert Schmidt and you might reading Greenbaum's dissertation.
Right.
Okay. Go on.
I'm not sure. I've read the dissertation by Greenbaum, but
it's not practical orientated. You can't use the book for doing what Martien is doing in these webinars. But it gives you a lot of information about the philosophy and the theology background of the time when this method was put into writing. Vettius Valens is relying on older sources. So we are basically in the sphere of Nechepsos and Petosiris and soul background divinely organized, and we are, and the book of Greenbaum is bordering on the problem, why does astrology work?
Right.
And it's not in the sense of Abu Mashar that, like in an Aristotelian way, that we are talking about natural philosophy. Not by far. Nechepsos and Petosiris and Hermes Trismegistus, they were not on the side of Aristotle that this is natural philosophy. In my opinion, we are talking about a rift between the Arab astrologers who tried to sell astrology as natural philosophy, whereas the real sources like Nechepsos, Petosiris, Hermes Trismegistus, they are talking about something quite different. And they're talking about a system which belongs to the theory of Gustav Adolf Schöner, who is presenting his theory, that things like aphesis belong to a divine sphere which might be attributed to religion science and not natural philosophy.
Yeah. Yeah, that's also, this is exactly something that Robert Schmidt also said. Well, the Arabs were very faithful to all the things they inherited from the Greek texts, but the problem was that a lot of things were also not quite clear. So
Yes.
they systematized a lot of that material, which is also in the medieval astrology now, and unfortunately, Ptolemy was a very big influence after a certain period.
Yes.
In
Well,
the,
they didn't know that. They didn't
and,
know that Vitus Valens was much more important than Ptolemy.
Yeah, right. Because
Okay.
Ptolemy never mentioned Vitus Valens, neither did Vitus Valens mention Ptolemy.
Yes.
And Ptolemy is very much responsible for turning the astrology more to a Aristotelian.
Yes, I believe Ptolemy is the starting point of the dead end of astrology trying to be natural philosophy.
Right, right. I think so too, yeah.
Okay.
So let's get back to the Platonic stuff.
Yes. And even with Plato, there's a book in the market, How to Read Plato Between the Lines. Okay. There is a strong indication that what we have of Plato is not the real Plato, but we should look to Pythagoras to have an idea how divine astrology is. And there's a strong indication in the modern academic research where they are starting with Empedocles and Parmenides, like Robert Schmidt does. If you dig into Empedocles and Parmenides and Pythagoras, then you are talking about a divine, a god sphere, which is not approachable with the categories of Aristotle. Okay. And the problem is we don't have categories because the categories belong to the Aristotelian side of our brain, the left side. And it very much could be that the astrology we are talking here, the aphesis and the daimon. I mean, what is daimon? You have to answer that question. And if you try to answer that question, what is daimon, the guardian angel, you're starting to slip into magic. And the problem is, what if it would be the case that what we are talking here is magic not good enough understood by us? Because we too are no magicians, because we have not the tools to practice magic in a way much more than Agrippa of Nettesheim described it. It's nice to describe magic, but how to do it? And if aphesis is a magical approach, we are on the starting point and not on the end point.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned Pythagoras, and Robert Schmidt in his later period was convinced that it was Eudoxus of Cnidos who was the one who started this system of Hellenistic astrology, the real founder, and he also suggested that this might be the Hermes Trismegistus we are all talking about, which is Eudoxus of Cnidos. And some people...
but what the real problem, what Robert Schmidt didn't publish at least, is who was that guy, Eudoxus of Cnidos? What if Eudoxus of Cnidos has a life story not being told yet, being in direct contact with spheres of influence where we labor whether these spheres of influence are the real background why astrology works?
Well, he was called the last Pythagorean philosopher. I'm not sure.
Yeah, but what is that? What is a Pythagorean astrologer? I mean, if you talk about Pythagoras and you realize there was an inner circle where the whole tradition was from mouth to mouth, was orally. There's no written text about what they are talking in their inner circles.
No, that's true. But of course, Eudoxus did a lot of things for science. But he also went native because he went to Egypt and stayed there in the priesthood for several months.
And then we are talking about the Aphesis and Petrosius and Hermes again.
Okay, right. Yeah.
Okay.
So let's get back to this method. very interesting. And yes, I talked about this in the last workshop I did on the Nightlight Astrology webinar, and you can find the complete talk on my YouTube channel. But this is what this is all about. This is something that Robert Schmidt first introduced. It wasn't recognized as such before he worked on this, and it goes like this. The words used for angular, what we now call angular places, were actually pivots or centers or stakes. Stakes is the latest word introduced by, I believe, Benjamin Dykes for these angular places, which is a pivot where something turns. And what turns there is the movement of the zodiac, because in the first place, the ascendant, the rising image, is where the zodiac appears into the light from darkness. In the 7th place, it's the other way around. And in the 10th place, the upward movement of the zodiac turns and centers and turns to the downward period movement, sorry. And in the 4th place, the downward movement of the zodiac turns into an upward movement. So these are centers, something changes there, which is a very important thing. And Schmidt said that you can use the neighboring places of these pivots, of these stakes, as having to do with the stakes with which they are associated. So the 10th place is very archetypal for what is going on here. The 10th place has to do with your place in society and what you do in your life. And you can say that the 11th place has to do with friends. And what do friends do? They help you come forward in your place in society. And that's the reason why the 11th place has to do with your network, the people you hope that can help you getting further in your life, which is also the reason why children were associated with the 11th, because in earlier days, when you got older, you only had to rely on your children to help you through your position as an elderly person. Now, when you look at the 9th place, that is the issues that pull you through your life, which is often a certain philosophy. That's the reason why the 9th place has to do with philosophy. It can be a religion, because a religion says how you need to act in society with your people around you and your community, etc. And it's also the legal system, because when you don't know how to behave, they formulate rules for you to follow. And when you don't, you get a sentence, right? You get punished. So this is what happens. The succedent place is pushing towards the 10th, and the 9th place, the cadent place, pulls you over this place. Well, look at that presentation and you can learn a lot more about it. So you have 4 systems called angular triads, because with the first place, the 12th image and the 2nd image have a lot to do as houses, as topical places, have a lot to do with the first place. So
when you're talking about systems, you mean that all these angular houses are systems by themselves. So the first place is a system by itself, as complicated as what we're doing with Aphesis.
Yes, and it has a lot to do with that the 2nd and the 12th place are actually focused on this pivot. So the topics of the 12th and the 2nd place have to do with the first place, because the first place is what it's about. And the 10th place is what it's about in relation to. And
how about these pivots? When do they come into life?
Sorry?
When is the pivot, the stakes? What do you mean by pivot and stakes?
A pivot and stakes is a place where something is at the center. So the first place is the center of a change, because in the first place, the zodiac...
Yeah, and that's what I don't understand. When does the change happen? How and when?
No, this is a concept about what is going on, what characterizes these places.
So you mean this is not something like the pivots in our Aphesis discussion. This is a deeper way of delineate the natal chart.
Yes, but also trying to understand why these 12 places have these significations that they do. And for that, you have to look at this article, which can be found via my to get in contact. If you don't have it, The Facets of Fate, that's an article by Robert Schmidt, in which he explains everything about this, and which I will sort of introduce in the next 2 slides.
Will you put a link under your video?
I'm not sure, because it's in my personal
Oh, it's not published on the internet.
Yes, it is. It's on the web, but I don't know. I'm not sure where. So.
Oh, so you think if the viewers go searching for The Facets of Fate by Robert Schmidt, they might find a PDF somewhere. Okay.
Yeah, they find a PDF somewhere. Might be, and when they do not, they can contact me, and I will send.
Well, I hereby contact you. Please send me your PDF.
Okay, I will do. Okay, so let's have a look at what this might mean for our method of zodiacal releasing, Aphesis. Let's first look at the diurnal rotation. We know that is clockwise. So the diurnal rotation has something to do with this. So again, we take the 10th angular triad because it's paradigmatical for what we are doing here. So the 10th place is a cantron, a center. So when a planet is in one of these angular places in a center, then you can say that everything turns around this planet. So they are central. That's why.
What if you have 3 planets in the 10th house?
They are all central.
So I have 3 central places, and I have the problem to understand what's going on, because they are rather different sort of planets. I have Mars, I have Moon, and Moon is my chieftain, and I have Saturn, and I have 3 central planets.
Right.
And basically nobody can delineate that, right?
I'm not sure, but they all play a very central role in your life. That's the basic thing you can say about that.
Okay.
Whenever you have a planet in one of these centers, this is what it's about. It's the things of this angular triad, because we need to think in terms of angular triads, have to do with these planets in your 10th place. So the 10th place significations all turn around these 3 planets being there. Okay. So now, and what you can see in the diurnal rotation, the 9th place precedes the 10th place, and the 11th place follows the 10th place. So
wait a minute. We are diurnal rotation. What the word precedes is a contradiction in this picture, because preceding the 10th in this picture, because of the diurnal rotation, is the 11th. Right.
So a very good question. So now we have to look at the other movement, which is the zodiacal rotation.
Now, because there it's correct. In the zodiacal rotation, the 9th is preceding the 10th. That's right.
Right. So in the Aphesis scenario, it moves the other way around. So when you move through the 9th, 10th, and 11th place, this is what happens. So in the 9th place, you can say, this is what precedes the action which is going on in the 10th place. And the action of the 10th place is followed by what happens.
Now we are back
in the zodiacal order.
In the terminology, yes, preceding and following,
Right. Now, if you look at my chart, which I will do first, and then I will have a look at your chart, Volker. The Pisces is my 9th place, which was started in 1988. Aries is my 10th place for 15 years, and Taurus is the 11th place for 8 years. Short period. Okay. In your case, it's a very long following place, because in your case, it's another image which lasts for 27 years. So this is also very individual, because each of these periods differ in length of time. So again, this is the very interesting facet of this method, because it really divides up the life for a person in certain periods, which are longer or even shorter. Okay, so Schmidt said this: the Cadent place you can associate with necessary preparations, experimenting, exploring possibilities and digressions, and or false starts. And I will illustrate it in my life, because in my life it's very exemplary of what happened.
I have a question for that. Where is your Jupiter in your chart?
Jupiter is in my 6th place.
So basically the domicile ruler of Pisces is in the 6th place.
Right.
What does that mean if the domicile ruler is somewhere else for this interpretation of this cadent place?
It has something to do, actually not much, but it has to do with the force in which these things manifest themselves.
Oh, okay.
So when you look at the ruler, so the fact that Pisces is a cadent place and the ruler is also in a cadent place has a lot to do with what happens in this period in my life. So
it's only an additional information. It's not a very strong problem where the ruler is.
Not at first glance, no. You have to understand this as a basic structure of what's going on.
Okay.
So I will get to the specific interpretation in a moment.
Okay.
Now, when you look at the canton itself, the 10th place in this case, it is the center of the sequences of events happening in this angular triad. So this is the center of what's going on. This is the most important place, and this defines what's going on in this proceeding in my scenario, going from Pisces to Aries to the Taurus, because the succeeding place is the continuation of what happens in the angular period. It's sort of a completion of what started in the angular period. And this is a very interesting signification and a follow-up of what's happening in each of these periods. And they are all of several lengths, because the periods of the images are different from each other. Which is
sometimes considering our Aphesis webinars situation, sometimes the lot of diamond is placed in the chart that we will never get to the 10th house in the Aphesis. As an L1, I mean.
That could be, yeah, could be. But then it moves through one of the other angular.
So basically you are saying the L1 is nice, but the really important music is playing on the L2 level, because then we always get to these places.
No.
Yes, more or less.
When a person dies in a very young age, they perhaps do not come to an angular period.
Okay.
But they are always in one of the angular triads, because each image starts in one of the angular triads. So okay. So in an interesting way, you could say that in a cadent place, you are sowing something. In the angular place, something is growing. And in the succeeding place, you are harvesting, which is a very interesting thing to do. And Schmidt said each triad can be seen as an episode in a biography, and each episode has 3 chapters. Interesting take on this.
Okay, when you I come back because I have problems to understand this. If you say each triad, I'm trying to understand where we are in our discussion. We started today with Aphesis problems, and we are looking at L1 and L2 and something. Right. Where are we here now? Is that in the Aphesis context we are talking?
Yes, because I will show you what happened in my periods, which are a very good illustration of the principle.
So we are inside the Aphesis context.
Yes.
And this is all part of the Aphesis zodiacal releasing method.
Indeed, it is, yes, and a very important one.
Okay.
So look at what Schmidt said about this. The events occurring in the angular house itself are at the center of the entire sequence of events occurring in these angular triads. So that's an important statement. In the angular place, the real defining actions for the entire angular period begin, and these tend to come to completion in the next succeeding house. So, okay, it is the angular house in which the period of trial and error, which is the cadent place, stops and ends and results in a certain definitive action. So let's have a look at my place. So this is the theory behind what's going on in angular triads, and try to understand that when major periods travel through these angular triads, you can find certain very defining things about what's going on in somebody's life. And sometimes even you can say that it's about the essence of what's going on in a person's life. In that case, you can say it has to do with destiny.
Basically, you are saying when we are talking about a L1 or L2 or L3 period, we are always talking simultaneously. If we are talking about the 10th or the 1st or the 7th or the 4th, that there is always the two places beside the L period we are talking about are also implicated.
I'm not quite sure what you're saying now, but...
Okay, try again. When you're talking about angular triads, those angular triads are reflected in our Aphesis approach, and then we have a certain L period, whatever.
Right, yeah.
And then we have always, for understanding the concrete period we are talking about, we have to look at both sides influencing the period we are talking about.
Right, that's a very good statement, yes.
Okay.
And the interesting thing is each L1 period in such a triad has its own specific periods in the L2.
Yes.
Which we have defined as the turning points.
And there we have again the same situation. If it's an angular quality, we have the both on both sides as well.
That's true. Yeah. So let's have a look. So to try to understand what's going on here, you can say that the sowing period is the cadent place. You're building up something. You're setting up a sort of a stage, even if you don't realize it, which I didn't when I was in this period, but I will come to that. So when we come to the pivot, then we are really acting on it. We are playing with it, and we are manifesting what we want to do. And it's also very much based on what happened in the previous period. And when you come to the harvest image, which in my case is Taurus, then we get either applause or we are put down or something like of the sort, which is in the following, the succeeding places. So this is the scheme of what goes on when you have such a triplicity of images following one another in an angular triad. So this is my 10th place angular triad, how it's activated. So let's have a look. So now I'm trying to decide on what is going on here. So, and I do this in an evaluation. So I know what happened, so I can see that in the factors I'm using for trying to get to the heart of this. And I will also try to do that with Volker's chart and his biography, but this is what happened.
Question to this chart, 2, 3, and 4 means that your diamond is in Aquarius, right?
It is, yes.
Okay.
So this happened in the second period of my life, according to this scenario. And the third place was Aries, and the fourth place is the Taurus, and the next place will be in Gemini. So indeed. So Schmidt said something very important. What this whole triangular triad is about, you can determine by means of the angular image in one of these triads. So in my case, it's about the 10th place. So let's have a look. So the preparations, the digressions, the false starts, which was actually in my life, had to do with two sorts of astrologies. The first one was the happy-go-lucky psychological astrology that I learned. And then I was gradually challenged in that because I started reading other things, got books about traditional astrology. And then it really blew up when the situation with my firstborn daughter appeared. And as I said before, Mars is the domicile master of my 5th place. And we will later see that the 10th place also has to do with children, according to ancient sources. Well, that's what happens. So whenever you see the major period being opposed by a malefic, then you can expect turbulence in the period, which was certainly the case in my Pisces period. It was a good period, no doubt, but it was also challenging, which had to do a lot with Mars being in opposition to it. So then I came to the Aries period, which is it's an angular sign, so it's about action, doing and making, which is a specific signification of the 10th place. So there we see Aries in opposition with Jupiter. And that was really the struggle of getting to grips with fate in my life, which had a lot to do with my first daughter. Didn't understand why this was happening to me, as happens with a lot of people when fate strikes in your life, and also in astrology. So I had a quite severe midlife crisis. I was trying to reformulate my astrology. I did an intense study of all traditional astrologies, search into philosophy, etc., etc. Personally, I was very insecure, as my previous philosophy of life and my views were severely challenged. I'm not trying to be dramatic or something, but this was the worst period in my life. Even though that good things happened, in the beginning, I was really depressed, and it was really a bad time for me. So
that's because in that period number 3, in the 10th house period, you had this opposition between the ruler of Aries and Jupiter.
Right. So
if in a concrete other situation, the ruler of the 10th house had no aspect whatsoever, what would that mean?
Well, when Mars would have been in the 12th place, like it was in my situation, because
without any aspect,
then it would still be the same, because Mars is in the 12th place. So the 12th place is the center of what's going on in
so it's not the aspect which was creating this turbulence. It's the domicile ruler in what place he is. If he would be in the first place, it would be much nicer than in your chart.
Yeah, right. And then it would be about me personally. And in this case, it was also, but it had a lot to do with what was happening with my situation in life, which is a 10th place issue. So, so a lot of things happened, and I got to deeply into Robert Schmidt's material, which was both challenging because it made me insecure about my astrology, and it was also very stimulating simply because, well, it's Robert Schmidt, right? So that was very interesting. And then I get to the last period, which is the one I'm in now, happily. And then I published my book, Moving and Being Moved, The Return of Fate in Astrology. And that, interesting, I can only say this in retrospect because I didn't realize it at the time, but looking back now in this moment with doing these videos with you, Volker, I understood, this is actually the quintessential issue that came out of all the studies and all the turbulence and all the difficulties and you name it. And this is what I harvested from it. And it still yields, because the reason I'm doing these videos and getting invited again and again for the webinars from Nightlight Astrology has a lot to do with what I learned in this period. And that it's
basically considering the fact that Robert Schmidt passed away, unfortunately, in 2018, he gave the torch of zodiacal releasing to you, more or less, because his wife is not able to distribute the contents of his knowledge in a way that the whole world can watch it. This is what we are doing is free, nobody has to pay anything. And this means that the content, the free content of Robert Schmidt on zodiacal releasing is with Chris Brennan in his one video, and he might write a book about it. I'm not sure what his new book will be about. But we are the only people on the net without a fee for doing this.
Right, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, well, that's perhaps something having to do with the with Venus being a very inviting planet in our case, in my case. I'm not sure if I'm, well, the interesting thing was before this period, I started rewriting my book on zodiacal releasing. And that was in the period that Robert was still alive. And I had some contact with his wife, Ellen Black. And they were happy with it that I was doing that. They could not endorse it because they don't know what I was writing about exactly, but they endorsed the how do you call it, the redirection of my book for the Dutch market. So that was very nice. And I had some good contact with Ellen Yeah, unfortunately, Robert died, and we had to stop that.
Do you know what he died of? Was it a heart attack?
Yeah, I believe he had cancer.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so this is very interesting to see in retrospect, because that's what I'm doing now. I'm seeing in retrospect, wow, this really works. Because in my life, even though it was difficult at the times, I could not understand what was going on at these moments, even though I had this fantastic instrument at my hands. I could not quite get the grasp. So this is such an important instrument to get a grip on your life and trying to understand what is going on and why it's happening. And looking back, I feel a bit silly because I had the instrument and I didn't get the clue in this case, but now I do, and I hope people will enjoy it. So
would you say that might be the most important aspect of Zodiacal releasing Aphesis, that the retrospect aspect is much more important than the delineation for the future?
I think it's both, because when you're looking back, you are making sense of your life, right?
Yes, that's what I mean. Yeah.
Yeah, right, and that's very comforting.
To understand the individuation process in the sense of Jung, this method is very important. Right. It might not be so important to plan the individuation process.
Well, you can have a look ahead, I think.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. Because when you're looking at this, what I'm going to show you now, this is very important information for anyone who studies this method, because what happened was when I was looking back, whilst preparing this presentation, right? This just dawned on me a few days ago. When I recapitulate the issues that were going on in all these periods, it was about my place in society, my status as an astrologer, because I was a well-known and seen astrologer in the Dutch community. And that changed radically when I started attacking psychological astrology, which I will get into in a moment. My profession and place in the astrological scene changed. It had to do with my firstborn daughter, a child. My marriage was at stake in a certain place, and my mental health, because I was in a pretty severe depression. So, and then I started reading back. So what does Valence say about the 10th place? And he says this: it's about what one does. Yes, that was at stake. It's about your reputation. That was at stake. It's about children, your wife, change and renewal of things. Well, these are all things that were happening at that time. So when I evaluated in my place in society, my profession, my firstborn, my marriage, my mental health, etc., Valence says that it's all about the 10th place. So that was central in this period, which I can only confirm. Yes, that was what's going on.
Okay, now, a question for that.
What about my mental health?
Yeah, when you're talking about 10th place, you're talking about the L1 level, right?
No, we're talking about the 10th place as such.
But in your concrete situation, we are talking about an L1 areas, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes, but in connection to what happened before, the Pisces period, and what's now happening in the Taurus period, which came after this one. But what Schmidt said is what's happening in the angular image, angular place of such a triad, that is what's central in all these periods.
So that means you mean that for the L4 level as well, right?
Yes.
Even for days, this could be
perhaps, yeah. But okay. They are highlighted. I will get to that in another presentation, the L3 and L4 periods.
Okay.
This is what is central in the whole period.
Okay.
Now, what
so
about
basically, this Aphesis method on all the levels has always this 10th place situation all the time.
When you are having such a sequence, yes. Because in your case, your sequence is in the first place. So we're going to have a look at that and try to figure out what's going on.
Yeah, okay.
Now, people might ask, so what about your mental health? Well, people might say, well, this has to do with the 12th place, where the ruler of the 10th place is, in my case, Mars, being the ruler of Aries and it's in the 12th place. I think that's true, but
but it could be 6th place as well.
No, let's have a look at what Valence says, because there is in book 2 a very interesting chapter on illnesses. And this is what Valence says, that the lot of fortune has to do with corporeal things, so things happening to your body, and the psychical places, which has to do with your psyche, have to do with spirit. And then he says on page 77, and they will likewise be known to you with reference to the place concerning what one does, which is the 10th place. Now, I have never heard anyone say that the 10th place might have something to do with mental health, but our friend Vetus Valence says that it does. And this was the 10th place. And of course, it's exacerbated by Mars being in the 12th place. But yes, my mental health really was at stake at this period. So,
and he says that spirit, in parenthesis, psychical place.
Right.
Basically, he is saying the lot of daimon by itself and all the complex delineation process with all the houses and aphesis methods is basically the whole daimon aspect is a psychological thing. So you can, so basically he is saying, because of that, mental health problems can arise in every house, because that's part of the daimon.
I'm not quite sure, but when you move the daimon through several places, and when the daimon, the place where the daimon is in this scenario has a difficulty with one of the malefics, then it might be that you're suffering psychologically.
Yes, yes.
And you can understand why I'm so surprised that none of the modern astrologers have ever had interest in this part of spirit. Because,
well, that's easy to explain because they are modern astrologers.
Yeah, yes, it's true. But I always say, wouldn't it be nice to have one specific point that really has to do with psychology or your psyche, which is the lot of spirit. But in a modern chart, all the impulses of your psyche are divided because you have all these planets, and Mars has to do with aggression or your assertiveness, and Venus has to do with how you do love affairs and how you, etc., etc. So the spirit is divided in this stuff, and it's always associated with the ruler of the first place. But well, we have a very interesting other thing having to do with the psyche of the native. So in this case, again, I will say that in my case, this was such a revelation. Even a few days ago when I started seeing this, oh wow, this is what was going on in my life at this time. And both periods, all three periods have to do with these issues having to do with the 10th place.
Yes.
So this is a fantastic method for predicting what's happening in somebody's life. Even though when somebody is in the preparing period of a cadent place being going on. So you might refer to, well, this has to do with something that's coming up in the angular place, which is related with this triad you're in at the moment. So this is quite an instrument. Okay. Now let's have a look at what I did. So these are the things that were going on in my life. But Mars, Aries, is the planet that has the rulership of the 10th place in my life. So for 15 years in my life, Mars was the planet that was happening. It was defining what I was doing, how I went about it, how I handled it, and what I had to deal with, because it's the ruler of the entire period of the 10th angular place. So what does Mars do? He separates and severs. Yes, that is true. I separated myself from what I had learned previously. He cuts off or pulls apart. Mortos is hardship. Yes, it was quite difficult to do so because it was so ingrained in my personality. And Mars takes notice, but with difficulty. Yes, it takes it head on or runs, fight or flight. No, I fought really much. it's the military approach. Do something. Yes, I did. Discover. There was a complete period of discovery of ancient astrology. I pioneered it because I challenged the previous things that everybody was doing, and I acted upon them. I tried to conquer it, and I had to start over, which is exactly what happened in this period, which is again a very apt description of what was going on and how I handled things. But this is how I felt. So Mars is also a planet which has to address fear, and he's a bit apprehensive. He's intimidating, which is true. People said that I was intimidating at that period because I had such strong arguments against modern astrology, but also for traditional astrology. But I was also intimidated because, well, I had to move from something that I had learned previously and had to change it into something else, which people were not quite open to at the time. Violence, cannot say exactly, it was not violence, but I was violent in my attacks on this astrology. I challenged it and I was challenged. I also said in a certain period, I never have had more fights in my life than in this period with people, conflicts, struggles, etc. That was in this period. And yes, I was courageous at times, but I was also intimidated. So, and the 12th place has to do with enmity. Yes, I had enemies in this period. I had opposition as well, frustration, etc., etc., etc. So again, you can see a very important lesson to be learned from this method is that it really has to do with how you go about the things that you want to do in this period, but also how it feels. And again, I don't want to dramatize it, but it was not a happy period in my life, even though also very good things happened as well. But looking back, I'm strongly reminded of the depression that was going on, and I'm not quite sure when it stopped. It was around 2010, I believe. Then I was out of it, but these 15 years were pretty severe and difficult in my life. Even though my marriage survived and I have a good relation with my firstborn daughter, my second-born daughter is a happy-go-lucky person, and I was very blessed in that sense. So, but looking back, this was not the best period of my life. So, okay, let's have a look at your chart, Volker.
Could we stop the recording for a short break? Is that okay with you?
Yeah.
I stop the recording now. Starting the recording again. Okay.
Okay, so having a look at your chart, Volker, that's interesting because you are in an angular triad as well, but it has to do with the first place. So,
yes.
So we're looking at the Scorpio period, which is sort of the preparation for what's going on, and the second one where the action is happening, and a very long harvesting period in the Capricorn period. So this is what's going on here. So I was allowed to show some things happening in your life, in your biography, which I will do, but they are very long lists and I will summarize some of them and show some things that were going on, but let's have a look. The whole angular period is about the first place. And so let's check what Valens had to say, because in my experience, as I explained in the previous slide, that was very interesting to read actually all the topics of my 10th place were really happening as Valens described them. But in your case, it's the horoscopos, which is life, helm, body, and breath, which has to do with perhaps health, your body, physical stuff, etc., and your life in general. So let's have a look. And of course, the ruler of the 9th place is also in your first place. So the 9th place issues have a lot to do with what's going on in this complete triad. So they have to do with friendship, being away from home, moving about, traveling, benefits. This is what Valens says. We would also associate it with the law, teaching, studying, etc., because the 9th place has to do with philosophy. It has to do with training and teaching and being taught things in higher education, etc. So,
and it's the starting point of my Rosicrucian career.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. We'll have a look at that, because that's the preparation period, which is very interesting. So what is also interesting, which I didn't do in my angular triad evaluation, but in the case of Volker, we in the first video we showed what might happen when periods follow up on each other, and you have to look at the aspects, the configurations of the new rulers with the previous ones, and you can see that in all these periods there are breaches simply because the rulers of the succeeding periods, the periods that follow up are all in aversion to each other, and an aversion always is sort of a breaking point. So something breaks off which is going on in the previous period. So let's have a look at that. So when we're looking at the first period of this complete triad, we see that it's the 12th place, which is under Scorpio. And Volker said to me that he studied banking in this period, but he wanted to become a judge also, which was also a possibility in this period. But in the end, he chose civil service because of his activity in the Lectorium Rosicrucianum. And that really says a lot about a cadent place. You're exploring possibilities, experimenting, and there are digressions and or false starts, which I'm not sure if they are false starts, but you're trying to figure out what you want to do, which is something which has to do with cadent places. False starts, starting again in a scenario from an entrepreneur. This might be a very interesting period when somebody's trying new products and trying to get them on the market, but it's not all working, and you have to, you are having false starts and have to start again.
But the basic reason why I ended up in civil service was the involvement with the Rosicrucian order in Germany, Lectorium Rosicrucianum, which is based in Holland, in Haarlem, was that the background is you have to do a lot of work inside the order. And if you are in an international banking career, you just can't do that. That's because that's the main reason why I didn't end up in banking.
Which is interesting simply because this says something about the 9th place issue having to do with the sun.
Yes.
Your identity is strongly associated with the 9th place, and the this spiritual group organization played a very important role in this.
Well, so, for the whole period of my membership in the Lectorium, it was sort of an identification with the order, right? Okay.
And the interesting thing is all the work also has to do with Mars, because Mars is a planet that has to work hard, right? So he's very active. So that's interesting. So you also got involved with, well, a marriage, but that's perhaps less important than the fact that you trained in medical homeopathy.
Well, I did train in homeopathic because my wife was a doctor. Yeah, I went with her. She was training in homeopathy, whereas I was being with her and got trained because I was there.
Yeah, exactly. So that's an interesting way of getting to some sort of knowledge.
Yes,
but the interesting
it really
thing
was, yes.
is the background of the documentation of special therapy directions and natural healing methods in Europe.
Yes.
And this
during these weeks in Bad Rickenau, where the training took place, I met a lot of people who were rather intrigued meeting a government servant, you know.
Yeah, I can understand. Yeah,
that's why, and because of those meetings, they became a relationship, and there I met the guy who later did the project documentation, those 4,000 pages. And all that happened only because I was with my wife in the homeopathic training.
Okay, great. Yeah, interesting. Okay, so, well, this is what happened. And you did a lot of work for the Lectorium Rosicrucianum.
Yes, I did.
Actually, sort of your second job, right?
Basically, it was the first job. The earning job, the government job was supplying the funds that I could do the Rosicrucian work, basically.
Okay. Wow. Yeah, so that is a preparation for things happening. But the interesting thing is that this is all about the first house, which has to do with you as a person, your personality, and the sun being in the first place in the Bowman, which is a very Jupiterian place, and the sun is there, the ruler of the 9th place. So that's very interesting. So let's have a look at the other one. And this all sorts of breaks off or is interrupted in the next L1 period because Jupiter is the new period ruler of the bowman, is in aversion with Mars, the ruler of this period. So let's have a look. Now, you said that the documentation of this manifest, the all 4,000 places, was published in 1992. Which
that was the publishing date, yes. That was the end of the project, basically.
Yeah, right. Which is the beginning of this new period. So
yes.
Something is manifested. And then the government changed, and then a lot of things happened between you and your superiors, etc., etc.
Yes, it was a turbulent time. Yes.
People can read this. It's a turbulent period with a lot of.
It was a turbulent period for Germany as well, because Gerhard Schröder became the Prime Minister of Lower Saxony. That was my minister change, and then my tasks changed, but basically the fate of Germany changed because he became Chancellor of the Federal Republic later on.
Right, right. That's, but that has something to do with the other branch of astrology, which is political.
Mundane astrology, yes.
So you were in sort of a sense victimized by this change because you couldn't do exactly what you did at the moment. What I forgot to mention is that in the previous period, you also, or is it in this period? No, your disability status was confirmed, right? Which was in the previous period, in the Scorpio period, which also has to do with chronic illness.
Yes, I was disabled because of the accident in 1972, but the manifestation of the disablement was in 1986. And in Germany, if you are a disabled person, and it's bad enough, at least 50% disablement, then you become a special disabled status person, and that gives you some advantages on the job. Because if there's an application for a promotional job, and you are on the level of all the other applicants on the same level, then you have to be taken because of your disablement.
Okay, yeah. So that. Yeah, interesting, because that has a lot to do with your body.
Yes.
Having to do with something beneficial happening to it,
yes.
even though with disability. So interesting. It's all about Jupiter and Venus in this case.
Yes.
So the people who are watching this, please read about all these changes going on. And the reason why this is so changeable is because the ruler of the major period is in a cadent image, which is the 3rd place. So that explains the many changes going on in the career path in this entire 12-year period. And it started immediately when the major perfection of the bowman started, because then the book of the 1st period was published, but also Volker's involvement in activities changed simply because the government changed.
Yes.
And his status as a civil servant changed. So that's interesting.
But the status didn't really change because I was appointed for life. But after that period, I got promoted to ministerial, which is my final position in the ministry.
Yeah, exactly. So that's a benefit from being a disabled person in your case.
That's one aspect of it. The other really interesting aspect in this period since 1992. A lot of Martian activity. I was complaining about superiors with the minister. That's not just normal. And normally, if you do that in a ministry, if you complain about your superiors at the highest level of the ministry, you are getting put away in a closet normally.
Right.
But because of the astrological constellation, that didn't happen. I was promoted 1 year later.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
When people are in contentious situations, that is a lot of times it's associated with Mars, but it's also something having to do with Hermes, Mercury.
Yes.
Mercury is also a very contentious planet. So he debates and he's in a
32 pages, written pages like Hermes delivered to the minister.
Complaining about one other person.
Yeah, it was interesting times.
Another very interesting thing happened as well, because there is a defining period in Volker's life in this period. And Volker told me he got interested in astrology, which was forbidden in the Lectorium Rosicrucianum.
In the time of the 90s, it was part of the lecturing of the Lectorium in the 40s, because the Lectorium is an offspring of Max Heindel, and this is in the history of the Lectorium Rosicrucianum. Not many members did know this history. But I found out about it, and I started reading Alice Bailey, and then what you can read here, I discovered there were some strange things happening on the highest level of the Lectorium, which sort of made my belief in the whole order a little bit crumbling.
I understand. Yeah. So
if your head guru is plagiarizing Alice Bailey, that's not what a supreme master should do, really, should he?
Right. Yeah. So interesting. It's a defining period.
Yes, it's a very defining period.
Yeah. Great.
But I ended my membership in the Lectorium in 2000.
Okay, exactly. At the
more or less
Gemini
the end
period,
of
and there we have Mercury again, the planet debating and putting into question certain things. So which is interesting because my Aries period also has Mercury in it. So that was the period when I started debating about astrology. So there's Mercury being a sort of an annoying planet asking questions that nobody can answer or explain or get a bit embarrassed about. So okay. Now, this period might also break off simply because again, the new period after this one, Saturn as ruler of Capricorn, is in aversion to Jupiter. And the interesting thing is that this was the period then when Volker retired. So interesting again, because again, a breaking off of a period by means of seeing that the ruler of this next period is also in aversion to the previous one. So,
and to realize this retirement was not a normal retirement, because I was 55. And the possibility to retire became because the new government had decided to abolish certain levels of administration. And suddenly they had too many people. So they were asking us if we want to retire. And the earliest age was 55. You had to be 55 to use this opportunity.
Wow. Interesting opportunities there, right? And
well, to retire with a rather nice pension when you are 55 and you have still a lot of life before you normally, that was a dream.
Wow, yeah, it was. Well, there we have again the what you can call the inheritance of what was happening before that period. So
it's sort of a harvesting, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And I was harvesting on my astrology studies, because my studies have been in 96, and now I could do a doctoral thesis on astrology and the law. In the beginning, the working title was Astrology and the Theory of Law, but we changed that to Astrology. And the interesting thing is, I didn't get to the doctoral title, because I failed in the end with non rete. But the book was published in 2010. Okay. My thesis is a published book with a non-retive result in the examination procedures.
Okay. Interesting.
And in that period in 2008, I harvested my astrology background in the way that I was the publisher of the Apocryphon of the Astrology, which is a 780 pages book with a lot of people who wrote there for this project. And it's still available on the book market.
Okay, great. So a lot of mercurial things going on.
Yes, very much so.
And Mercury is the ruler of a lot of spirit. So,
and it's in a mutual reception to Saturn.
Right.
Should not forget that.
As said before, you have a very strongly support from your chart in many ways. So yeah, you're a fortunate person, Volker, even though you had a disability. So back to what Fallon said about it. It's about life, helm, body, breath, and of course, very strongly connected to the ninth place issues because of the sun being in this angular place. So avail yourself of this method because it's very revealing, and I hope that these examples illustrate the importance of these angular triads. And a question for the readers. I have had no experience yet with people having such an angular triad in periods emphasized when it's the fourth angular triad. So when the aphesis of the diamond moves through the third, fourth, and fifth place, and also from the seventh place. So whenever any readers have experience with these angular triads, please comment in the sections of the reactions, and I will be happy to look at them with you with your chart. So, but I'm just simply interested in, because these examples are so telling and so revealing, which is again another sort of discovery simply by making these videos, that I'm very interested in. Okay, so this is what happened in my life. This is what happened in Volker's life. So let's have a look at people who have a fourth house angular triad or a seventh house angular triad activated by means of this method. So please comment, and
in case one of our viewers is willing to do the same thing what I'm doing, because I'm supplying my personal information here, like in a setting of a delineation counseling. If somebody is out there who is not afraid of sharing his personal life with the internet public, you might do an extra webinar with him, right?
I wouldn't mind that at all.
Okay, very good.
Okay.
So viewers, the gauntlet is lying before your feet. Okay.
So again, to complete this delineation, I also look at the ruler of these periods, because when it's all about the first house, in this case, we're talking about Jupiter, and what is Jupiter doing? He's doing this. So what Volker did, how we went about it, how we handled it. It's the philosophical or religious approach, perhaps the pompous approach, believing, motivating, advising, and discovering. And this is how we felt, because these are the places, the planets activated. That's a good period, I think.
And we have the Jupiter transit in May in my fourth place.
Yeah.
My fourth place is Pisces, and the Jupiter is entering Pisces in the 15th of May, I believe. And we will see how that affects my life, because we might still be doing webinars in that period.
We surely will. Okay. So, no, thank you for listening. And Volker, thank you for everything you contributed. And well, let's hope the viewers are content with it. And I strongly advise users to check out your angular triads, because they are very informative about what's going on in your life or what has happened in the past in your life. And we hope to see you again next time. Yes, and now you have to get rid of the sharing of the computer first. Yeah, not mute. You have to close the sharing of the computer. Yeah. No, not a new share. Stop sharing. It's on. If I do that, it's stopping the sharing. I'm looking at it, but again, in my case, it's on the top level of this desktop. So difficult here. Old people like us should not do this. Pause sharing. No. Stop sharing. Stop sharing the computer. The desktop. Yeah. Okay. And now you can give me back my host. More. No. More. You have to do it. Now I am the host. I'm back in control. Okay. So a good feeling, right? Yes, a good feeling. So check out the site, the special site with Martien Hermes webinars, and check out the webinars number 1, 2, and 3. And for today, our many thanks go to Martien Hermes, who is doing all this workload. I'm having the fun, you're having the work.
I appreciate this very much that you're doing this, because using a concrete person like myself for demonstrating a method is much better than just to talk about famous people. We never know what they were thinking.
Right,
You
right.
can ask me what I was thinking, I can tell you the answer. So for today, thanks for stopping by. Danke fürs Vorbeischauen und auf bald, and we stop the recording.